Story 1.
Trying to hold back my tears so the hungry werewolf prowling nearby wouldn't hear, I hid under the roots of a large oak tree, clutching my head in my hands and pressing my knees to my chin. Fear and anxiety gripped my stomach, and the strange sensations in my lower abdomen made me want to throw up to get rid of them. My whole body trembled from the cold night and fear. I was about to become dinner for a predator. The heavy snowfall was also making itself felt. If I stayed under these roots any longer, I'd become a small snowdrift. I didn't even know what would be worse, being eaten or freezing to death. How could my father leave me in this frosty Alaskan forest? Maybe it was my fault. I got distracted by a little deer and decided to admire it, not noticing how slowly I walked toward it. And Dad didn't notice this because he was always ahead, talking to me, but I rarely responded, as I often got lost in my thoughts. He was used to it and even liked having such a monologue with himself. I think if he did notice my disappearance, it was several miles later. Who knows how far I walked after that fawn? I'm the only one to blame for this situation. If I had kept the conversation going with Dad, everything would have been different. I wouldn't be sitting hungry and freezing under these roots, fearing for my life right now. The first 2 hours after realizing I was lost, I stood still, hoping Dad would find me. As in my childish mind, he was a super tracker and hunter who could easily find a lost child and take down a bear with his bare hands. Though he really was that way, minus the exaggerations. He couldn't find me in those hours. So after those 2 hours, I decided to act on my own. The sunset was approaching, and that was very bad for me. I'd say horrible. Gathering my thoughts and recalling what my father had taught me, I followed my own tracks. Snow was falling, but very lightly, so it hadn't completely covered my tracks. Luckily, there was no wind. I don't know how far I walked, but after some time I reached a dead end. There were no tracks, as if no one had walked there. I was surprised and felt uneasy. They couldn't just disappear like that. Why were the last tracks visible, then suddenly just clean snow? It was already getting dark and I needed to act. But what could I do? My body was already weak, and my stomach wouldn't stop demanding food. But I had nothing to give it. Dad carried all the supplies and tools. I could only hope that the night would be clear and full of moonlight, so there would be some illumination, or I wouldn't survive in this stupid Alaskan forest. I continued wandering through the forest, hoping to see the light of a lantern in the distance. Fatigue kept growing and growing. I just wanted to lie down in this pure white snow and sleep. But I wouldn't wake up if I did that. Even if I was lucky enough not to freeze to death, wild animals might not be as lucky. I could already hear the werewolf's howl, but I leaned more towards thinking it was just the wind or some other animal, maybe even a bird. My fingers were already numb from the cold, and my toes were beginning to freeze. My eyelashes were covered with a thin layer of snow and ice particles. My long hair had slipped out of my hat and fallen onto my face. I could feel how icy they were, noticing occasionally when they fell over my eyes, turning pure white. My cheeks burned from the cold. They were probably already rosy, and I looked like a snowman who couldn't handle this doggone cold. Luckily, I had dressed warmer than usual, or I'd already be an icicle. The sun had already set behind the horizon, giving way to the moon, which didn't bring me any joy. It was dark enough that I had to strain my eyes to see what was happening a few feet away. Once again, I heard a howl, but this time accompanied by quick footsteps. This frightened and tensed me greatly. Thoughts crossed my mind. What if the werewolf is stalking me and waiting for the right moment? Now he's the hunter, and I'm the small prey, and he's playing with me, giving me a ghostly chance to escape. But he knows that no matter where I go, it will be pointless. He'll find me anywhere. I had to move as slowly and carefully as possible, straining to see in the darkness and listen intently. But I wanted to speed up, even run, but nothing good would come of it. My strength would leave me quickly, and I'd become an easy target for wild animals, especially for my gray neighbor. My body would sweat, which meant I'd freeze faster and die. Walking slowly wasn't a good idea either for the same reason, the cold. But it was better than running blindly into the dark, where the unknown awaited. I didn't know how much time had passed, but my legs were already refusing to move. I constantly stumbled and fell face first into the snowdrifts. My face burned and stung. One time, I didn't want to get up and fight anymore, just give up. Only thoughts of my parents gave me the strength to get up and walk through the pain. It was excruciating to imagine my mother crying while my father tried to comfort her, promising to find me. I was sure he had already gathered a group of people to search for me, and only that thought kept me warm. It gave me hope of surviving in this cold January forest. To avoid falling asleep, I talked to myself a lot and thought about many things. Sometimes I had to slap myself to stay awake, or I'd collapse and never wake up. I wondered if an ordinary child could survive in such conditions. A typical child who enjoyed toys, played with friends, and did whatever they wanted. The kind of child who never went hunting alone in the forest and wasn't trained in this craft all their childhood. I'm sure they couldn't. First they would cry, then fall on the frozen ground, and the last thing awaiting them would be an ordinary death from the cold. This amused me a little. I was better than them and could survive in such conditions, or at least try to do something about it rather than give up without a fight. On the other hand, it saddened me. I wanted to be like all the other kids, not a young hunter. Looking at the starry sky, I felt sick. Huge clouds were approaching. In a few minutes, I would be without moonlight, alone with the grim forest and the inevitable threat. Suddenly, a terrifying and piercing werewolf howl echoed through the forest. At that moment, I was genuinely terrified to the point of madness. Panic overwhelmed me. My eyes darted around the forest, trying to find something or someone. My legs buckled. It became even harder to stand. A nervous chuckle escaped my lips. It seemed I was having the luck of a drowning man tonight. Soon my fate would be decided, either a painful death, or I'd manage to get far enough away from the werewolf and find help. With all my heart, I hoped for the latter. But I understood that the former was more likely. And then it happened. Dark clouds completely obscured the moon and brought one of the strongest snowfalls I'd ever seen in my short life. The cursed wind blew so hard that my face ended up in a snowdrift again. My poor legs struggled to keep balance, but they tried their best. But my eyes suffered the most. Now I couldn't see anything beyond an arm's length. Everything around took on a dark blue color. Maybe it seemed that way, or maybe it was a problem with my vision. I couldn't tell. Now the snow underfoot was dark blue with a slight tint of white. Each further step was taken with great fear and pain in my legs. My head was filled with thoughts of a warm home and a soft bed, my mother's gentle hands, and my father's kind eyes. Each time I replayed these thoughts in my head, I wanted to cry and stop, to rest, but I couldn't. Any stop or tear would kill me. If I did that, I would weaken and not be as strong as I was now. My body would just stop obeying me, so I had to keep going. I had to get home to my parents, and I just had to survive in this frozen forest. The occasional hoots of owls and all sorts of incomprehensible rustles scared me to the point of heartache. All these sounds made me stop and look around. Each time, my knees shook more and more, even though I understood it was just harmless birds or the cracking of branches from the wind. It seemed that if I stayed here a little longer, I'd fall from the cold. My young body couldn't endure such trials much longer. Even now, I was amazed I had lasted so long in this dreadful cold. And once again, the gray werewolf made his presence known, now growling nearby, seemingly just a few yards from me, but darkness and the blizzard concealed him. My breathing was completely off. My heart pounded wildly, but it was just an illusion. I had to stop to listen and understand where he was and try to calm down. I strained my hearing as much as I could in my pitiful state. Silence. I couldn't hear anything except the crunch of trees. The wind drowned out everything, worsening the situation. But I still stood and listened, hoping I could detect him. I'd like to believe he left, but that's unlikely. He's been watching me from the start, waiting for the right moment when my body and mind give up. He wants to feel like a true hunter who doesn't kill his prey immediately but waits for the right moment. I'm sure the werewolf understood he could have easily dealt with me at the beginning, but he didn't, meaning he clearly enjoys watching me suffer. Perhaps several minutes passed as I listened intently to my surroundings to determine where he was hiding. Absolute silence. Most likely he realized I was trying to figure out how close he had gotten. Another couple of minutes passed, and then I heard him. It would have been better if I hadn't, because his heavy breathing sounded behind me. Everything froze inside me. Oxygen refused to enter my lungs. I started to suffocate. My face turned blue. Warm sweat trickled down my frozen forehead. I didn't want to believe what was happening. He was standing right behind me, watching me. With difficulty, I managed to catch my breath so my lungs started working again, but it was such a hellish struggle. The first breath was painful, I don't know why. I had only two options: run forward and not look back, or slowly turn around to check if he was really there. There was no time for deliberation. I had to act. Common sense suggested, even screamed, to run. But how far could I run? Curiosity, on the other hand, told me to look over my shoulder. After a few seconds of deliberation, I decided to turn. Curiosity won that battle. Very slowly and with great fear, I turned my head over my shoulder. My heart was about to burst out of my chest, and my eyes were ready to pop out of their sockets. I was trembling all over. It seemed like time had stopped or slowed down significantly. Snow fell slowly to the ground as if it didn't want to. I was sure it was all in my imagination, though I believed it was really happening. Adrenaline was at work, making everything seem slow in my eyes so I could react to danger. And then my head reached the point of no return. There was no turning back. I squinted to see everything in the darkness. I wanted to close my eyes, but then I wouldn't be able to face my fear. At first, I saw no one, only the void between the trees. But as soon as I stared into that void, I noticed his muzzle. Yellow eyes glowed in the dark, looking hungry, angry, and cunning. His jaws were open so wide that drool flowed abundantly onto the snow. So much steam came out of his mouth that it seemed like a mini-train, not a werewolf, was in front of me. It looked as if he was smiling at me. Maybe it wasn't like that, and my child's imagination made it up and presented it as reality. My gaze remained fixed on him, and my head was filled with thoughts of what to do next. Nothing useful came to mind. My brain seemed to die at that moment, leaving only instincts and feelings. I quickly turned away from him and looked ahead. My body was paralyzed. It stopped feeling the cold and stopped obeying my commands. At that moment, I felt absolutely nothing but the fear that settled in my body and tightened my muscles. It seemed I was standing in complete silence, not even hearing the wind. A menacing growl came from behind me, breaking the mysterious silence. It was like waking up from a dream, and now my eardrums were filled with the whistling wind again. My pupils dilated and my breathing quickened many times over. A moment later, I was running, not even remembering how I started running. It was like I was in a trance, waking up just now. My last strength was leaving me. I didn't know if he was chasing me, but I kept running as I had never run before in my short life. I didn't even suspect I could run so fast. My breathing quickly became erratic, but I tried to keep it steady, as my father had taught me. Breathe evenly and rhythmically. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. It sounds pretty simple, but when a werewolf is chasing you, and your life depends on how well you run. Such a thought flashed through my mind, but it wasn't time for that thought. In this hellish situation, I also had to watch my steps to avoid falling, and that was my downfall. I crashed into a tree with all my might. The pain was so unbearable that I involuntarily screamed throughout the forest. The forest inhabitants reacted to my scream. The sound of birds taking off around me reached my ears. The flapping of wings was so loud and clear that it seemed like an incredibly large flock of birds took off near me and now circled above my head. Due to the dark night, I couldn't see them. It felt like they were now watching me. Maybe they were signaling the werewolf that I had stopped here, doing it for the bloody spectacle where the gray werewolf would tear me to pieces. Maybe they wanted to feast on me too, for example, on my eyes or drink my fresh and warm blood. No, probably not. This is all my wild imagination. Just a coincidence that they circled right above me. The monstrous pain brought me back to reality. The pain in my forehead was especially sharp. It seemed I had broken it. Touching my forehead with my hand, I felt warm blood. My whole body began to tremble. A sharp pain pierced my head, and my stomach started to churn. I felt terribly sick. Blood trickled down my forehead, mixing with tears of despair. At that moment, I fully realized my situation and the hopelessness. I was just a child, lost in the night forest, and there was nothing I could do to survive. My body ached with pain and exhaustion, and my stomach twisted with hunger. Falling to my knees, I cried out to the sky. Why? Why did you follow that stupid deer? What was the point? Why didn't you just keep going with Dad? Now you're suffering because of your stupid mistake. Now you'll perish in this forest. At that moment, I lost control. With my last strength, I pounded the ground, pouring out my anger on myself. Mom, Dad, I want to go home. I want to see you again. Please take me away from here. I moaned and didn't realize I was already lying on the ground, face down in the snow. I couldn't lie down. I had to try to stand up and keep fighting, even though I no longer believed in my strength. With great effort, I managed to stand up. Standing was extremely difficult. I swayed from side to side. The fear of taking a step overwhelmed me, knowing I could easily fall and never get up again. Taking small steps, I moved forward, not knowing where, not knowing what awaited me or what would happen to me. But I continued my journey. The rustling behind me returned, just like the birds circling above me. There was no doubt he had returned to me if he ever left at all. Now he decided to remind me of his presence again. My body knew it couldn't run again, and apparently the predator knew it too. Realizing these were likely my last steps, I resigned myself to death and just kept walking. The only thing that scared me was not knowing when he would attack. That's what was truly frightening. But as long as he allowed me to walk, I walked. A large tree appeared before me, probably an oak. Thanks to my father, I knew most of the trees, plants, and animals. Thanks to him for this knowledge. Only because of it, I lasted so long. If I managed to survive, I would definitely thank him for this. From under the ground near the oak, incredibly long and large roots protruded which I had never seen before. Though, what was there to be surprised about? I was still young and had a lot to see in my life. The roots grew so strangely upwards. It seemed as if they had created a small room for some little gnome out of themselves. I also wanted to know how tall the oak was, but again, the night hindered me. I thought I could hide under the tree roots. They weren't that high. It was very narrow and low, but I still managed to crawl under them. I hugged my knees to warm up, but it didn't help much. Snow still seeped through the roots and fell on me. Fixated on resting, I didn't pay much attention to this at first. Only later did it start to worry me as I began to turn into a small snowdrift. I checked my forehead. The blood had frozen, forming a thin layer of red ice on my forehead. I decided not to touch it anymore or try to scrape off this ice, fearing it would only make things worse. Let everything remain as it is. Gradually, sleep began to take over me. My eyes closed by themselves, and I saw my home. To stay awake, I had to lightly slap my cheeks, but it didn't help much. All my thoughts were only about home, a warm and cozy home, and again, the tears returned. Suddenly, Snow crunched nearby. He was very close to me. I had to hold back my tears so the predator wouldn't hear me. I grabbed my head, pressing my knees to my chin. I rocked slightly from the shivers running through my body. I needed to get out of here. But how? Fear paralyzed me, and my stomach was in turmoil. I could only listen to what was happening around me. Blood ran cold in my veins with every rustle. I could hear the snow crunching under his paws and his heavy breathing. It seemed he was on the other side of the tree, sniffing me out. I hoped my hearing was deceiving me. I had to act urgently. I needed to make a sudden dash for freedom, or I'd freeze to death here or be found by him eventually. I managed to calm down a bit and gather the courage to make this dangerous dash to freedom. As soon as I started crawling out from under my hiding place, I heard a piercing growl nearby. The werewolf growled right next to me, but it seemed he wasn't growling at me but at someone else who had approached. The deafening growl echoed again, much closer this time. Could another beast have come for my soul? And it was likely a large werewolf. I peeked out from under the roots to see what was happening outside, ready to run away immediately. It was indeed a large werewolf of an intimidating size. He approached the oak, where the smaller werewolf stood. The smaller one growled angrily and reluctantly, backing away. It was clear he feared the larger one. The larger werewolf approached him decisively. I didn't understand what was happening. Were they deciding who would eat me? As soon as the larger werewolf got close to the smaller one howled and ran away from the oak. I didn't know if this was good for me or not. Now I had to fear not the small werewolf, but the huge one approaching me. Panic gripped me and I crawled back into my hiding place. I closed my eyes and prayed he wouldn't find me and would leave. The snow crunched at my roots, and my heart pounded furiously. He had found me. The large werewolf sniffed greedily around the roots under which I was hiding. Suddenly, unbearable pain shot through my left leg, and I screamed. He had struck me with his paw and then bit into my leg. I howled in pain. He was pulling me out of my hiding place. I grabbed onto the roots to prevent him from pulling me out completely. My fingers clutched the roots so tightly that it hurt. but this pain was nothing compared to the pain the werewolf inflicted on me. But what could a small child, already exhausted, do against a large werewolf? Nothing. I couldn't hold on to the roots for long. He simply yanked me out. The large werewolf dragged me across the ground, and I desperately grabbed at everything I could, even the earth. Gradually, my left leg lost feeling. After dragging me several feet, he threw my exhausted body. I tried to crawl away from him, but he came up to me and slashed my back with his sharp claws. My entire back burned with pain. I had no strength left to scream. Only a slight whimper escaped. My whole body convulsed in agony, and I could do nothing. Now the large werewolf would tear me apart, and that would be my end. The most horrible and painful death awaited me. If I was going to die, I had to die a hero. I turned onto my back and tried to stand up to fight or attempt to escape, even though I knew it was impossible. Just as I started to get up, the large werewolf struck again, this time hitting my face. My right eye swelled shut, and I couldn't see out of it anymore, and my left eye filled with blood. Everything around me took on a new color, a disgusting red. The crimson werewolf approached me, and I was losing consciousness, ready to accept my fate. But unexpectedly, a gunshot rang out in the distance. The werewolf turned toward the sound of the shot and let out his signature growl. He seemed displeased and frightened. The large werewolf decided not to risk it and ran into the forest, just like the smaller werewolf he had driven away. It looked like my salvation. They had found me, and I would soon be home. "Dad, hurry, I feel awful," I whispered. Turning my head to the left, I saw red lights in the distance. They swayed left and right like the pendulum of a wall clock. It seemed they were running toward me, hurrying as fast as they could. I had survived this night. Thank you, Dad, for finding me so quickly. Now all I had to do was get up and walk toward them, and I would be saved. My attempts to stand were painful and unsuccessful. I managed only on the 5th try. All the other times I fell. Once I stood on my feet and maintained my balance, I immediately vomited. I bent over and threw up. Everything was red. Luckily, I didn't lose my balance, or I'd have had to repeat the same actions to stand again. Slowly, I walked toward the lights, wanting to speed up, but couldn't, no matter how much I wanted to. I swayed from side to side, and my left leg was limping, a true torture to step on. My soul sang with joy that the end of this hell was near, and I would be home, seeing my mom. Inside, warmth from the triumph over this forest filled me, and I knew I would never return here in my life. Under no pretext would I come back. It was strange to see everything in a scarlet color, but there was something unusual about it. The lantern lights seemed like small red stars traveling in the endlessly snowy forest, heading right for me. I hoped my body could heal, and my eyes would recover. At least so the left one could see again, but in normal color. With each step, the number of fiery orbs increased. There were about 10. They were getting faster and faster. Maybe 100 yards left, and we would meet. Just a bit more, I could handle it. I wouldn't faint on the way to them. Suddenly, I felt a push to the side and fell. Something knocked me over. It felt like someone had jumped on me from the side, knocking me back into the cold snow. I didn't understand what was happening. What had happened? Had I been attacked again? I was so close to salvation, and I was attacked again. Why? To finish me off? My right side was ablaze with new pain. Someone had sunk sharp teeth into me. Unintentionally, I screamed with all my might. The pain was unbearable, still burning in that spot. Turning my head towards the bite, I saw that damn smaller werewolf again. Why had he attacked me again? Why me? Why right when help was near, and in my mind, I was already in bed? Unstoppable rage took over. I hit him on the head so hard that he howled in pain but continued to devour my flesh. He began to jerk his muzzle from side to side to inflict more harm, and it seemed like he was going to tear a piece of meat from me. This enraged me even more, that he wanted to enjoy me right before my freedom. I plunged my left hand into the snow, trying to find something to hit him with, while continuing to punch with the other hand. Unexpectedly, he let go of me, but I didn't immediately realize what had happened due to shock and adrenaline. It turned out this abomination had managed to tear my side open. I was furious about this, and I no longer cared about all my pain. Rage and fury controlled me. Feeling something hard with my left hand, I hit the werewolf in the head with it without thinking. The beast staggered. This was an opportunity for me, one I couldn't miss. I quickly pounced on him and started beating him. He continued to resist and fight back. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to gouge his eyes out with my thumbs. The more I pressed, the louder he howled. At that moment, I just wanted him to feel the same pain I had experienced throughout this devilish night. I got carried away and didn't notice he was already dead, but I kept hitting and screaming. It was an incredible pleasure, sweet revenge. At that moment, I remembered my father was close. When I was killing the werewolf, my head was in a fog, and I forgot about it. Looking up, I saw the large werewolf standing before me, apparently unhappy with all this. Why had he come here? This fight I could no longer win. He growled and moved toward me. Like under the roots, I closed my eyes, not wanting to watch as he attacked and devoured me. But then 2 shots rang out, and the large werewolf fell like a rag doll. It was Dad and other hunters. They had found me just in time. I was happy. "Oh my God, son. What happened to you? Don't be afraid, you're safe now. And you'll be home soon." Dad's voice trembled. I saw his face through the red haze and noticed his eyes were teary. "I'm so glad, you foe." I fell forward, and the last thing I saw was the poisoned moonlight. The clouds had cleared, and the birds had flown away, leaving only the stars illuminating us along with the moon. When I opened my eyes, a bright white light blinded me. To my surprise, both eyes could see, which made me incredibly happy. I lay on a bed, but it wasn't mine. Looking around, I realized I was in a hospital. My parents slept nearby, huddled together on chairs. Unintentionally, I smiled. I couldn't believe I was completely safe and that the nightmare was over for me, a small boy. I tried to wake my parents, but my voice was gone, and my body ached so much and was so weak that I couldn't even lift my hand. I waited for one of my parents to wake up, but while they slept, I watched them with a smile and warmth in my heart. They had probably not left my side and hadn't slept all this time. I didn't know how long it had been since I ended up here. I think they hadn't slept for at least a day, but I was willing to wait as long as needed, as long as they got their rest. They had suffered just as much as I had. I didn't have to wait long. My mom was the first to open her eyes. Her face lit up with happiness, and tears immediately began to flow. This woke up my dad, who had the same reaction. They jumped from their chairs and rushed to embrace me. Mom kissed me several times. "Son, I'm so glad you're okay. You're the strongest boy in the world. You survived alone in that dark forest," she cried, her voice choked with tears. "I was so afraid of losing you. Dad, I'm so sorry for everything that happened," I whispered, struggling to speak. "It's not your fault. I was the one who wandered off." "No, it's my fault," my dad cried out. "If I had been more attentive, this wouldn't have happened. If you hate me, I'll understand. I love you more than my own life. Please forgive me." At first, I blamed my dad, but he wasn't at fault. I was the only one to blame for this tragedy. I was deeply ashamed that my father was blaming himself for it. "No, Dad, you're not to blame. It's all my fault. If I had talked to you and not drifted into my thoughts, you would have noticed my absence immediately. And if I hadn't gone after that deer, none of this would have happened. Please don't blame yourself," I managed to say with great difficulty. It seemed to me that I had spoken loudly, but in reality, it was a quiet whisper. 6 months passed, and I was almost fully recovered, though I still had to use a cane because my leg hadn't fully healed, and I limped a bit. We moved away from our home near the forest so no one would remind us of that horrible incident. Now we lived in a small town in Alaska, and I was still getting used to city life. I thought I could handle it soon enough. It seemed easier than surviving in a forest where local inhabitants tried to kill you. Only Dad still found it hard to live in the city and work at his new job since he had been a hunter all his life. But I believed with all my heart that we would be fine. The only thing that still scared me was the nightmares. Every time the sky covered the moon, I had a nightmare. I relived that night, but with a different outcome, where I was devoured alive. Each time I woke up drenched in sweat and trembling, hiding under the blanket. At first I screamed in my sleep, and my parents would rush to check on me. But in the last 2 months, I stopped screaming and now just woke up abruptly from the dream. I hoped that over time it would stop, and a normal, peaceful life would come for me and my parents.
Story 2.
These days, too much importance is given to dreams. Countless interpretations, hidden meanings. Sometimes it seems people expect too much from the wild imagination of a relaxed brain. They hope for hidden powers of the mind that are released only in sleep. It's hard to understand those who dare to make important life decisions based on dreams. One way or another, sleep is an integral part of our lives. Indeed, people sometimes give it too much significance, but you learn its true value only when you lose it. It's like a curse. "So, you think you've been cursed?" asks Dr. Sturmine wearily. Dr. Sturmine is a highly recommended psychologist from my colleagues at work. His appearance inspires trust, and if I were an ordinary visitor, I would have laid out all my childhood complexes right from the doorstep. But in this situation, I wasn't an ordinary visitor, and therefore, the cute mustache and beard on his round face were more irritating than reassuring. A business suit and a bow tie with red polka dots instead of a tie. This simple trick was meant to elicit smiles and ease the atmosphere. For me, it evoked no emotions. "Of course not," I sigh in response and abruptly rise from the chair. "I'm too old to believe in curses. It's just strange." "The situation is indeed strange," begins the doctor in a pleasant tone. "It's quite difficult to claim that a person doesn't dream. More often, they simply forget their dreams. Doctor, understand. I wouldn't attach so much importance to it if I just forgot. Hundreds of people forget their dreams, and I doubt any of them worry about it. I'm not paranoid, Doctor. This is different." "What exactly?" "It's hard to explain. When I go to bed, it's as if I'm being switched off, and when necessary, I'm switched back on. Understand? Almost 8 hours disappear from my life every day. I'm getting scared to sleep. It's like I'm dying, and there's less and less certainty that I'll wake up in the morning." Dr. Sturmine's office is designed to be calming. The walls are covered with pleasant-colored wallpaper. The furniture is arranged according to feng shui, and luxurious potted plants adorn the room. Dr. Sturmine himself radiates calmness and tranquility. But thinking about the small death that awaits me at night makes my blood run cold. There's a term, dreamless sleep, a rather rare and unexplored condition. Therefore, I can't confidently diagnose you. The only thing I know for sure is that you need to sleep. It's scary, Doctor. I won't argue. But sleep is important for the body. You must let your body rest. I'm afraid that rest will become eternal. No need for such gloomy thoughts. I will definitely try to help you. Tell me, how long have you stopped dreaming? About 2 weeks ago. Did anything happen 2 weeks ago? Nothing memorable. Just the usual routine. Maybe problems at work. No, our law firm is rock solid, and I have no issues with the boss. Perhaps an anniversary or a significant date. No, I don't think so. Though, wait. 2 weeks ago was the 5th anniversary of my father's death. I didn't immediately remember. Why? Didn't you visit his grave? In Idaho? I say, genuinely surprised. It's quite far to travel, Doctor. I turn to the window and look out thoughtfully. My hands unconsciously fiddle with the black onyx cufflinks. Memories of childhood clothes, quite different from $5,000 suits. Surface unbidden. Torn jeans at the knees, plaid shirts, high boots. I return to the chair, calming myself with the click of my expensive shoes as I walk. Tell me, did you love your father? Love is too strong a word. The doctor's question distracts me from my memories. I respected him more, but still, my father died 5 years ago. How can that be connected? Maybe something from your childhood resurfaced in your memory. Perhaps something unpleasant associated with the past that you dreamed about 2 weeks ago, and after that, your consciousness blocked the dreams? I understand your plan. My lips involuntarily stretch into a smile. You psychologists love to blame everything on childhood traumas, as if that solves everything. In more than half of the cases, it actually does. Childhood traumas have a colossal impact on adult life. Tell me about your father, Mr. Dolman. I don't know, Doctor. The memories of when our father raised us are very hazy. Tell me what you remember, insists Dr. Sturmine. My father, Banny Dolman, was known as a very good hunter. And of course he tried to teach us, my brother and me, this craft. From a young age, we learned to lubricate and clean guns, to shoot accurately. Father always took us and Terry hunting. Our house stood in the forest, and our family practically survived thanks to hunting. Father taught us to track animals and identify whose tracks they were. We often set traps deep in the forest. You know, Father even turned it into a kind of game. He gave us traps and tools to carve our symbols. That way, we could count how often prey fell into whose traps, and who among us was the better hunter. I remember I simply carved RD for Rate Dolman on my traps, while Terry approached it creatively. He carved various stars and lightning bolts. He loved hunting more than I did. And why didn't you like hunting? Asks Dr. Sturmine. Killing animals, skinning carcasses, blood. You must agree. Not the best memories for a 9-year-old boy. The doctor nods understandingly. And where was Mrs. Dolman? Mom died when I was 5. A car accident. I'm sorry. The doctor looks down guiltily. It's okay. It was a long time ago. And after I went to college, I never returned home. I lived on scholarships and allowances. After graduating as a lawyer, I got a job at a law firm where I've been working to this day. About 7 years ago, Terry moved in with me. I helped him find a job and an apartment. That's it. The end of my boring life story. Dr. Sturmine, carefully studying his notes, looks at me with a sly squint. It turns out all your most vivid impressions were received in childhood when your father raised you? The doctor doesn't wait for an answer. From his lips, it sounds more like a statement. I'm convinced that you should return to your homeland. Maybe there you will find the answer to your ailment. I sigh heavily. Doctor, Maybe you could just prescribe me some drugs, or at least marijuana." The doctor shakes his head with a smile. "Damn psychologist. Our plot is almost in the middle of the forest." After getting lost on the roads in the Land Cruiser, I arrived only late in the evening. A shiver ran through my body when I got out of the car. Nothing has changed. The 2-story house I grew up in looks just as grim. The shed where we skinned the prey and dried the hides still stands. Next to it is a small garage with a crooked roof for Father's Rambler. And still, I don't dream. Opening the garage gates, I confirm once again that it's just for the Rambler, for that old junk, and it's not worth trying to fit the Land Cruiser in there. Locking the car, I head to the door. My hand in my pocket nervously grips the keys the notary gave me. Father bequeathed the entire plot to Terry and me, but after the funeral we never bothered to come here. I was assured that the heating system and generator were in good working order, but all this will have to wait until tomorrow. Rather, I will have to endure the cold and darkness until then. I had to push with all my might to unlock the door. It opens with an unpleasant creak. The wind immediately whistles into the living room, lifting the trash from the dusty floor with relish. The flashlight cuts through the darkness of the room like a blade. Stepping over the threshold, I feel an unpleasant tingling in my groin and shivers running through my body. Fear surely penetrates the body this way, but in this case, it was not fear of the big, empty, and dark house, but fear of another small death that awaits me ahead. Placing the flashlight on the floor, I return to the car for the sleeping bag. Slamming the door, I search under the moonlight for the right button on the alarm remote. Hearing the cheerful beep, I head back to the house. But beyond the threshold, I'm met by darkness again. No trace of the flashlight. Just a wall of darkness behind the door. Cursing softly, I don't dare cross the threshold. The first night I'll spend in the car. Damn flashlight. Waking up was quite painful. Despite the impressive size of the Jeep, I couldn't stretch my legs properly, and the comfortable seats are good for sitting, not lying. However, I doubt a night on the cold floor in a sleeping bag would have been more comfortable. But there was definitely a good moment. I woke up. Cautiously stepping over the threshold, I search for the flashlight. The last thing I need is for a damn ghost to have moved in where I grew up. The flashlight was right where I left it. Clicking the switch, it became clear the batteries were dead. Smirking, I tuck the trader into my pocket. Creaking up the old stairs, I climb to the second floor, and my legs carry me by habit to the white peeling door. Our room. Tugging at the door handle, I'm genuinely surprised. In childhood, the room was never locked. Finding the right key on the ring, I return the door to its usual open state. There's the bunk bed. As the eldest, I got the top bunk, which Terry always envied. Our childhood nightstands and desks. It's amazing Father kept them all. Now I fear the bunk bed will be too small. Down the hall to the right is the bathroom. The next door is Father's room. The house is quite empty. It always was, really, but it's quite strange that there's no sign of any guns. In a hunter's family, that's considered sacrilege, but after Father's death, there was no one to keep the weapons. This makes the house feel even more desolate. In the ransacked kitchen, I found a refrigerator. However, it seemed more hygienic to keep a pack of chips and biscuits in the Land Cruiser. I spent the rest of the day doing household chores. The boiler and generator were in excellent condition. By evening, the house should be warm, and the darkness no longer scares me. In Father's room, I found an amazingly soft, wide bed. I must admit, in childhood, this room was off limits, and Terry and I rarely entered it. Now the only thing spoiling the mood is the sickly sweet smell of decay spreading through the house. It's one of those disgusting odors that fills your mouth, making it seem like you've taken a sip from a cup of filth. Even stepping outside into fresh air and spitting numerous times doesn't get rid of the taste, and your head starts to ache slowly, as if you've sat in a freshly painted room for hours. Searching every corner, I check the basement. Although the house is choked with dust, there's no sign of decomposing animals. Biting my lip, I decide to check the shed. The shed is the scariest place from my childhood. Here we stored hunting gear, traps, and we also skinned the prey. We hung the hides to dry. Few people know how to properly skin, say, a fox. You have to remove the skin in a tube, starting with incisions on the hind legs from the middle finger to the backside, then to the anus. On the front legs, the cuts should go to the armpit. Only then do you start removing the skin from the hind legs, separating it from the carcass and cutting the tough ligaments with a knife. Once the legs are done, you move on to the tail. You cut the skin around the anus and a few centimeters along the base of the tail, then carefully separate it from the carcass and pull out the tail vertebrae. The tail skin is cut along its entire length. The skin is then removed by hanging the fox by its hind legs. You need to pull the skin, grabbing it with your fingers at the points where it's attached to the body. The tip of the snout and nose are left with the skin. Finally, you remove the cartilage from the ears. After skinning, the pelt has fat on it. You must scrape it off with a dull knife, moving from the tail to the head. Then the skin is hung to dry. However, the shed is now surprisingly clean. The unfamiliar bare walls, the old oak table, all covered in knife marks, frequent holes from nails and screws. This is our work table. We branded our traps on it. Father taught us to use traps for a long time. Before setting the traps in the forest, we practiced setting them on the table multiple times. It's a real science. The most important thing is to choose the right place. For this, you need to know the animal's habits. Before setting, you need to rub your hands with pine or forest grass, then wear canvas gloves. Take the trap out of the bag and rub it too. You set the traps one by one, leaving the equipment bag 60 meters away. The best places are thickets, fallen logs, brush piles. When setting the trap, you mustn't breathe or cough in its direction. The force of the trap's jaws causes tendon damage, joint dislocation, bone fractures, and in some cases, limb amputation. The trapped animal experiences hellish agony. If you don't check the trap in time, the animal can stay alive for up to a week, dying in pain from blood loss. That's why Father made us check the traps every morning. And I must say, it was very tedious because we set them deep in the forest, requiring a long walk. The screech of metal on stone snapped me out of my grim memories. I looked around in bewilderment for the source of the sound. Nothing. The door slammed loudly behind me. A shiver ran down my spine. I spun around quickly, but there was no one behind me. The smell of decay at that moment became unbearable. Swinging the shed door open, I peered outside, but there was no one there either. Cursing myself for foolish fear, I returned to the house. There's no point sleeping in the car, but without bedding, I had to grab the sleeping bag. I'm walking. Trees slowly drift by on either side. My right leg throbs painfully. The scent of the autumn forest mixes with the sickly sweet aroma of decay. The stench becomes so sharp that a lump rises in my throat, but I manage to hold it back at the last moment. Changing direction, I sigh with relief. The night wind carries the smell of decay away. My steps slow down. When I put weight on my right leg, a sharp pain shoots through my body. Catching my breath, I lift my gaze to the sky. The enormous sphere of the moon fills my consciousness, and guttural growls escape my throat. My nostrils flare wide. There's an intruder here. My paws carry me forward instinctively. Paths, ravines, these places seem very familiar. However, I can't say for sure. Everything flashes by too quickly. On the horizon looms a dark figure. Blinded by rage, I pounce on the intruder. There's a muffled whimper. The opponent quietly whines as I pin its throat with my paws, greedily tearing into its full belly. This creature was well fed, and the food hasn't yet digested. The taste of prepared food mixed with blood makes the feast even more delightful. The intruder remains alive when I finish with its stomach. In the dark brown, warm eyes there is pure agony. Finally, the whimpering stops, and powerful jaws snap the neck of the unfortunate creature. Something falls from the intruder and clinks, breaking the silence. Keen eyes catch the collar with a silver bone tag that gleamed in the dark. The pathetic house dog shouldn't have ventured onto my territory, unless it wanted to become dinner. The wind now blows at my back, and the smell of rot fills my nose again. The meal wants to come back up. I need to hold it in. If it comes out, I'll have to hunt for dinner again. And hopefully, something tastier than a pitiful mutt. Changing direction again to face the wind, I delve deeper into the forest. But then a faint, barely discernible scent wafts through the air. It's him. It's his scent. He's here. My stomach clenches in a spasm, and my jaws part in a predatory grin. He's back. In the first moments of waking, it feels like I'm bound. Panic seizes my mind. Struggling desperately to free myself, I tense every muscle, hearing fabric tear. This sobers me up, and in the next second, I remember I fell asleep in a sleeping bag. The sound of the zipper tearing open, and I'm out of the bag. I could swear steam is rising from my body. Large drops of sweat roll down my forehead. I don't know what that was, but it was terrifying. My hands are intact, my legs too, and there are no drops of blood on my lips. Thank God, I think, washing my face. For a moment, it felt like I turned into that beast, and that smacks of a cheap horror movie. "Doctor, what the hell was that?" I asked desperately. "Don't worry, Mr. Dolman." Even over the phone, Dr. Sturmein's voice is calming. "What you saw is called a nightmare." I know it was a nightmare, but those sensations, they were so real. It was like I was actually that beast, and I felt everything it felt. What could this mean? You want me to interpret the dream? Yes, damn it, yes. There are millions of dream books and interpretations. Does my dream really have no meaning? You mentioned the beast had a wounded right hind leg. Did you have any injuries in childhood? No, I never broke my legs. And my hands are intact too. And the beast's leg isn't just broken. It's festering. Something like a splinter or a shard. It seems like it has a terrible abscess. And it seems strange to me that with such an injury, it could develop such incredible speed. You talk as if it were all real. But it was real, damn it. At least in my dream. Well, I'll try to find something about it. And by the way, there's a positive aspect to all this, Mr. Dolman. What is it? You're dreaming again. I definitely hear the irony in the doctor's voice. Go to hell, doctor, I reply without malice and end the call. Well, Ray Dolman, you're alone again. You don't know how to make friends, definitely don't. After all, Dr. Sturmein was the only one I had a decent conversation with in the last 2 years. Colleagues at work don't count. You never went to the bar with them, didn't participate in corporate parties, and even in conversations, you rarely strayed from work topics. A brother whom you supported for a long time, both morally and financially, got married and forgot about your existence. Girlfriends are only interested for the first 2 weeks of dating. Your life is damn boring, old man. How old are you now? 30 or 35? Does it matter? After all, you find out about your birthday from a text from the cell phone operator. You pride yourself on a high-paying job, expensive suits, and refined taste. But there's no one in your life to boast about it to. Looks like Dr. Sturmine was right. The most exciting times were in childhood. And though it was scary and disgusting, you were never bored and never alone. And even though the old man was strict, in the end, he raised a hunter in you. At 12, you went hunting for bears with a double-barreled shotgun. You, your brother, and your father survived on what you caught. And to be honest, could those over-salted or undercooked meals compare to the exquisite dishes from restaurants you order now? Back then, you didn't know what Chateau Latour or Chardonnay was, but there was much more flavor in life. These gloomy thoughts drive me to find the standby bottle of whiskey under the car seat. Sitting on the Jeep's hood, I take swigs of the fortified drink straight from the bottle, biting off corn chips. And with each sip, the thoughts grow heavier, and living gets nastier. Suddenly, my nostrils catch the sickly sweet smell of rotting meat again. Damn it! Who died here? I shout in a drunken voice. Unsteady legs carry me to the shed. The door creaks unpleasantly. The bottle slips from numb hands and rolls across the stone floor, generously spilling whiskey. What the hell? I whisper, instantly sobering. On the shed floor lies a mangled body, intestines spilling from the torn stomach all the way to the door. In a pool of dark, dried blood lies a collar with a silver bone tag. Rate. What have you gotten yourself into? A cheap horror movie? No, nothing like this can happen in real life. Most likely some city kids decided to play a prank or make fun of me. Though I'm sure all the horror movie characters thought the same. At first, but you know how it all ends. You've watched hundreds of those movies and know that the one who doesn't believe in the reality of what's happening dies first. And nothing personal. But you're not fit for the lead role, my friend. Enough. It's time to stop talking to yourself. The second me is some kind of paranoid. Is it a dog's corpse? Well, to hell with it. I have a bottle of whiskey and the dog doesn't. All you need to do is finish the bottle and get into the sleeping bag. And if tomorrow, with a clear head, the corpse is still in the shed, you can calmly roll up the bag, get in the car, and drive home. The damn bottle is half empty, and the neck is smeared with the blood of the non-existent dead dog. I have to admit that fake blood tastes a lot like real blood. But that's nothing. The whiskey taste will override it all. The freshness of the night forest. The unbearable smell of rot. Soon he will pay for what he did to me. Soon this unbearable torment will end. The smell of rot is too strong. Soon dogs from all over the area will start chasing me. And I'm afraid I'll be in bad shape by then. Oh God, this smell. It's driving me crazy. The crows are so brazen they peck at my swollen paw while I sleep. Sometimes it feels like all the rot from the abscess is flowing into my body and poisoning my life. I slowly roll from my injured paw to the healthy one, trudging along the familiar road. The house looms ahead. The too familiar two-story house. A Jeep is parked at the porch. He's in that house. I can smell him. The scent has changed slightly over time, but without a doubt it's his scent. And I can sense his fear. He knows I'm coming for him. He already got my gift, but still doesn't believe it. Well, soon he will pay for everything. Doctor, damn it. This creature is hunting me. It wants my blood. I'm shouting into the phone non-stop, though Dr. Sturmine can hear me perfectly well. Rate Dolman, you're 36 years old. Calm down right now, or I'm hanging up. The doctor's sharp voice brings me back to my senses. But I feel like I'm going crazy. I found tracks around the house. My father taught me hunting well. I don't know any predator that leaves such prints. By shape, they resemble a fox's paw. But the size is not fox-like. And doctor, these tracks are left precisely around the house, as if the beast intentionally left them. Why would it do that? The doctor wonders. How should I know? Maybe it wants to scare me. And it has done an excellent job, Mr. Dolman, Sturmine concludes. Silence hangs on the line. After all, you advised me to come here, I mutter, breaking the pause. Don't blame your nightmares on me, Mr. Dolman. You have strong emotional experiences tied to this place. It's no wonder you have nightmares. If you're scared or worried, go back home. I pull the phone away from my mouth and take a breath. All right, doctor, you're right. I'm going home. Putting the cell phone in my pocket, I head to the car. There's no desire to check the dog's corpse in the shed. The alarm responds with a sad beep. The engine roars mournfully. The car reluctantly rolls towards the highway exit, and so I leave the house of my childhood. The house where I recently realized I was truly happy. Ahead lies either sleepless nights or nights full of nightmares. But at least that's some entertainment in a dull routine. Running from a ghostly, limping beast I've never even seen. If my father knew, I'd get a good beating. Who the hell does this damn beast think I am? I'm Rate Dolman, son of Banny Dolman, the most famous hunter in Idaho. And I'm not going to run from a limping dog. My father didn't raise me like that. Well, son of a bitch, tonight we'll see who's afraid. I returned before sunset. It was time to prepare for the hunt, and I would be the bait. However, the Remington .223 caliber slung over my shoulder and a dozen traps gave me confidence. The gun shop clerk assured me that such traps were even suitable for bears. I spent the rest of the evening setting up the traps, all according to the science my father taught me. It takes about half an hour to set up a trap, but seeing the completed work, Old Man Dolman would have given an approving pat on the back. The traps were set around the perimeter of the house, 2 near the shed entrance, and several where I suspected the beast had watched the previous night. Locking myself in my father's room, I sat on the bed and tucked my legs under me. The barrel of the Remington rested on my shoulder, and sleep descended with a crushing weight. Well, how did it go, boys? My father asked in a cheerful voice, meeting us on the porch. Terry showed off a rabbit carcass and a broad grin. And how about your traps, Rate? Empty, Dad, I replied, but it was a lie. Did you check all the traps? Check them well? 2 weeks have passed, and no catch. Of course I checked them thoroughly. Maybe some scent scared the animals away. I'll relocate them tomorrow, and surely I'll have better luck. And that was a lie. It had been a week since I'd checked the traps at all. Moreover, I lost the place where I'd set them, and every time I promised to change their location, I was just blowing hot air. My father shook his head in disappointment. I remember how his disappointment grew when he learned the truth. After a brief but intense beating, he sent me into the forest. You won't come home until you gather all the traps. I don't care how you find them, even if you have to check every bush or deadwood with your backside. And if any of them contain a dead animal, I swear to God I'll put your hand in the trap so you can feel the agony. That time, I found only 4 out of 5 traps. I didn't come home for 2 days until my father found me lying unconscious in the forest. After that, I completely hated hunting. A brief flash, and the scene changed. Darkness. Slowly, the room's outlines emerged reluctantly. A large bed. A man sitting on it with a gun on his shoulder. His eyes tightly shut, his breathing even. For the first time in a long while, he sleeps soundly. It's him. Even through the smell of grass, I could distinguish him. It's time to answer for my pain. It's me. It's me. Wake up. Wake up, damn it. The beast's thoughts are very dark. And if even half of them come to fruition, hell will seem like a kindergarten. Get up, Rate Dahlman. Why can't I wake up? Am I really going to helplessly watch as my body is eaten and enjoy it? Nostrils flare more frequently. Breath becomes erratic. The face contorts in pain as if experiencing a nightmare. But this is no longer a dream. The man panics, opening his eyes. A shot rings out. The beast lunges at me. Powerful jaws snap inches from my neck. At the last moment, I manage to jump off the bed. Kicking the door open, I run out of the room. Without looking back, I shoot and reach into my pocket for another cartridge. Trying to reload the gun, I feel something hard with my foot. A loud click, and steel jaws sink into my leg. Pain shoots straight to my brain. Tripping, I tumble down the stairs. For a moment, consciousness fades. Coming to in the darkness on the first floor, I lean on my hand to get up. My palm finds cold steel. Click. Blood spurts and I scream in despair. The trap's jaws close just above my wrist. Damn traps. Where did they come from? Damn beast. When did you... Trying not to lose consciousness, I lean on the gun with my good hand. Hopping on one leg, I open the front door. Miscalculating another jump, I trip over the threshold. The last thing I see is a pile of traps heaped under the door. Moonlight stubbornly shines into my eyes. Blood flows from numerous wounds, sapping the last of my strength. My arm is definitely broken, my leg too badly injured. 2 traps on the left and 1 on the right side. 3 more traps bite into my legs, and I don't even want to think about my back. I don't try to get up or pry open the steel jaws. There's no chance. The damn beast turned out to be a better hunter than me. The smell of rot returns. Heavy breathing is heard. Limping slowly, my killer approaches. Black as night, slightly larger than a wolf, with a snout sharp as a fox's. Bright purple eyes filled with rage. The mouth with enormous fangs is slightly open, the red flag of its tongue hanging tiredly. The beast lies down beside me. Gradually, its breathing evens out and slows. Turning my head, I see the swollen, festering paw. In the decayed flesh, maggots are visible and an old, rusty trap with the initials RD scratched into it. A hoarse laugh escapes my throat. Finally found the 5th trap. The poor beast got caught in it and somehow survived all this time. Suddenly I realize there's no one to look for me. No one will miss me. Except maybe the doctor. But now he thinks I'm heading home. It's sad. But I have enough time to feel everything the poor beast experienced. The beast falls silent. I no longer hear its ragged breathing. Rest, my friend. Your suffering is over, but mine is just beginning. And it seems an interesting dream awaits me, much more interesting than most of my life. Indeed, too much attention is given to the meaning of dreams these days. Hundreds of interpretations for each one. But sometimes they just point out the mistakes of youth, and it's frustrating that they can only be fixed by dying. When you stop dreaming, it's like a nightmare. When you see someone else's dreams, the nightmare becomes reality. A curse? It's simpler than that. A wounded beast seeks to quench its thirst for revenge. And I sought to bring peace back into my life. And damn it, now I'm going to sleep well. The bloody ground is a soft bed, and the night sky is a warm blanket. So go to hell and have peaceful dreams.